Hi, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. My name is Joy Yamaguchi. I'm the Public Program Supervisor at the Japanese American National Museum, and I'm so excited to welcome you to our JANM 30th Anniversary Digital Film Festival, where we are exploring the story of Barbara Kawakami, A Textured Life, a film produced by our Watase Media Arts Department. This program is part of our 30th anniversary celebrations. JANM is celebrating our 30th birthday this year. Since our opening in 1992. And we've been doing a series of programming and exciting activities all related to the 30th anniversary and JANM's history. And this is definitely no exception. We have some truly wonderful voices and folks from all across JANM's history and just really, I think, really representative of the wonderful stories that we've been able to tell over the last 30 years. I just want to encourage you, if you haven't yet watched the film that this program is about, you can watch Barbara Kawakami, A Textured Life right here on this YouTube channel. The full short film that was created in conjunction with the exhibition is available, and we would love for you to watch that, share that, and learn more about what we'll be talking about today. We'll also be doing more JANM 30th Anniversary Digital Film Festival offerings later on in the year, along with other wonderful virtual and in-person programming. So please check that out on our website, janm.org. We would love to see you join us for any of those. And we'd love to have you continue to be part of our journey over the next 30 years. So please do join us for upcoming programs, become a member, subscribe to this YouTube channel. We're really excited to see you and look forward to having you join us today and onwards. So with that, we're going to get started with our main program. And to do that, I want to invite John Isaki up to the virtual stage. John is our Senior Philanthropy Officer and was formerly the director of the Watase Media Arts Center. He's also executive producer of A Textured Life and on the curatorial team for the exhibit Textured Life. So the perfect person to kick off and lead this program. And he's been so wonderful in developing today's event as well. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to you, John, to introduce our other panelists and get this program started.
Thanks, Joy. And aloha, everyone. Welcome. When you look back at the past 30 years, definitely the Textured Lives project and the work of Barbara Kawakami stands out as one of the great highlights. For me, as a staff member for over 20 years at JANM, looking back, we've done so many different exhibitions, all of them wonderful in their own ways, but one that really stands out in my heart and spirit is Barbara Kawakami and the Textured Lives project. So we're very fortunate today to be joined by two very special guests. One is Barbara Kawakami's daughter, Fay Toyama, who's joining us from Hawaii. Fay has been a longtime educator in Hawaii. She was a school principal at both the high school and elementary levels, I think. And she has 2 master's degrees in education. And so welcome, Fay.
Thank you, John. Great to be here. Aloha, everyone.
And Fay also has a great deal of insight about working with her mom. And, Barbara is a few days away from her 101st birthday. And so, Fay has taken a more active role in helping Barbara with her work. Barbara continues to do amazing work, is really an inspiration for all of us. If you watch the Textured Lives video, you know that Barbara started her academic career at age 53 or so. She went back to school after Fay and Gary, her kids, had graduated, I believe, from college. So anyway, thank you for joining us, Fay. I also want to introduce Dr. Akemi Kikumura Yano, who is a familiar face to the museum. She was the original first curator at JANM and has gone on to curate many works at the museum. She's a published author of some amazing books. I remember her for her memorable performance as an actor in Farewell to Manzanar. And she's also a teacher. She is a professor at UCLA, Asian American Studies. I can go on and on about Akemi. We go way back together in that when I was a struggling film student at UCLA way long time ago, Akemi was very helpful to me in my thesis project. In fact, we co-produced a documentary on the actor Yukio Shimoda, and that's where I first got to know Akemi. And I was, from Northern California. I didn't really know Southern California that well, but the excitement of that project, working with Akemi and getting to meet so many people in the acting community in LA really convinced me to stay in LA and work at Visual Communications in the museum. So welcome, Akemi, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you, John. It brings back a lot of memories. We're lucky you didn't go back to Monterey, right? And you stayed in Los Angeles and continue to do the great work that you did. And now you're with the museum, and you've worn many hats, many titles, right?
That's right. 20 years. Well, Akemi and I both have served various roles at the museum. And I guess, Fay, you and I share something in that I initially got my teaching credential and taught school for a while. So I was only going to come to LA briefly for school and then go back to Monterey. But it's people like Akemi who convinced me to stay. But, anyway, this program is really focusing on Barbara Kawakami and her amazing work. And I would say her work constitutes a major part of the focus, the mission of the Japanese American National Museum. And, approaching 101, Barbara was not quite up to joining us today for this virtual session, but in looking through our archive, I came across some video of her relatively recent in 2019. She was honored by the museum at our gala as one of the charter members of the museum. She was one of the first people to demonstrate her support for what JANM was doing. So I thought we'd play that clip just so we get Barbara in her own voice talking a little bit about her involvement with JANM. And it's only about 3 minutes. So Joy, could you cue that video up and play it for us?
Well, when I reflected on the importance of the idea of a Japanese American National Museum, I first thought of Dr. Akemi Kikumura Yano. She was the first person I met from JANM. After contacting me in 1988, when she was curating the inaugural exhibit for the opening of the museum. Akemi came often to Hawaii since 1988. So I saw her, about twice a year, because that was when I realized that she was laying the groundwork in preparation for this, the Issei Pioneers, the project, yeah. Really, the people at JANM, in every aspect, the ones who take care of the clothing, and even Tomei, she's already retired, but she comes once a week to take care. I think I donated more than 400 items, and the kimonos that they have. In fact, Okinawan kimono, rare bashahu, I think Fay's, Ivan's grandmother. She lived in Kohala. She came as a picture bride. And the one she wore bashahu back in Okinawa is now today at JANM Museum. I never dreamed that someday my humble clothing would be, exhibited elsewhere in the world, That was really unthinkable. And so to think that to JANM, because they really emphasize education worldwide, sharing all the things that came to the museum, they really work hard at it to make it affordable for everyone to come and study, and it's also available on the internet too. My collection is shown on internet, and whatever they want to study, it's a good place to study textile, because the kimonos that I donated to JANM, some 150 years old, and when they came from Japan, the picture brides, they brought all the hand-woven kimonos that the grandparents have woven, grandmother has woven. So there's a very unusual textile that today you cannot see. Even in Japan, it's very difficult to get hold of. So what JANM has today, even they don't know the treasures that they have there, but they don't have time to open it. They have so many right now, My grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, the three were all born on the mainland. Yeah, and so one in Pennsylvania, one in Los Angeles, and one in San Diego. And so someday when they grow up, they're going to see, I hope they go to JANM, and all the other children too, that are born, all from, parents that left for college and never returned to Hawaii, and all mixed marriage, which is so interesting. The children are so good looking too, all hapai and, so cute. And so I thought, gee, I would like to vision someday that here, my three great-grandchildren, someday they would go to the museum and see what grandma did, all the research that they can see right before their eyes, and experience, all the excitement and learn what history was like in the past,
Well, Akemi, she mentions you visiting her regularly in the early days of the museum. Tell us a little bit about your first encounters with Barbara.
Oh dear. I was just so impressed with her energy and her memory. She was like a walking encyclopedia when it came to the early Japanese American experience in Hawaii. And I could see why, she was able to record those stories and people opened their hearts and their minds to Barbara, because she was so warm, and she knew she was fluent in Japanese, and you must remember that the Issei, many spoke pidgin English, or some spoke English, but mainly they were comfortable in Japanese, and so she knew both. And I think to be a good oral historian, you need to be able to connect with people and make them feel comfortable. Well, once you start talking to Barbara, you can't stop, because she just has that way about her, where she could dig up all of the, those memories, the secrets, the weddings, the divorces, the you name it. She was able to, get that open, and she was mainly, you knew that you could trust her. She had Well, if you met her, you'll never forget her. That's what I can say. And she's such a treasure, a living treasure. Thank you, Barbara, if you're watching. I adore you. Thank you.
You kind of get a sense of her energy in that video clip. You know, even she was 97 or so then. So, you know, it's hard for me to imagine myself 20, 30 years from now. But yeah, she just has that incredible energy. And, you know, the trust that you mentioned, you know, she actually was very reluctant to release the interviews she had done with these Issei women because they confided so much to her. And, you know, only more recently, most of these women have passed on now, but Barbara still has a great deal of care and respect. She doesn't want the families to necessarily have information revealed from what their grandmothers or great grandmothers may have revealed to her. So anyway, she just is an amazing example for researchers and scholars. You know, in the video clip, she mentions Fay, the clothing from your husband's family, the Basho.
Yes, right.
Can you talk a little bit about that history?
I don't know too much about it except what my mother said, but my husband's grandmother was from Kohala. And so she's the one who had that bashofu kimono. And she gave it to, I think, my mother-in-law. And my mother-in-law gave it to my mother. So it's when I think we started sharing with my my in-laws the kind of work my mother was doing. And my mother-in-law was very supportive and she admired my mother. And she always would say, oh, I wish I could have gone. She could have gone to college because she just loved the way my mother, you know, could do the work that she did. So she inspired my mother-in-law. And then after my my husband's grandmother passed away, that's when they were going through all of her things. And that's when she found this kimono. And she asked if, you know, the family if she could give it to my mother. So that's, I think, how it evolved. And that was first put on display, in fact, at JCCH, when there was a textile exhibit put on there. So I think that was the first time it was shown. And then I think it's with JANM now, right?
Yes.
Right, yeah. So, yeah. So in a roundabout way, I think when my mother first met Akemi, you know, working at JANM, it was, she knew about Hawaii's plantation and what that was like. But when she started working with JANM and Akemi, she realized that there was so much more out there. So in fact, when she had done the 250 interviews for her first book on Japanese immigrant clothing, we had I think a year-long discussion on what we should do with all of the things that she had collected and where should she give it? You know, where would it be preserved well? Where would it have the best care? And we decided on the Japanese American National Museum. So a great deal of thought went into that. And I know she has never regretted that decision. She is so happy with the way the museum has taken care of it, with the staff she's worked with. You know, she just appreciates all of that work of preservation and, you know, even getting the funding for preservation and the continued relationship she's had with everyone. She talks about you folks all the time. So, yeah.
Well, you know, it's kind of interesting. She mentions giving over 400 items to the museum. Many of them are full kimono and artifacts. And can you describe your mother's house for us about where all these objects came from?
Oh, okay. So she has a yellow cedar closet that was made. I think my grandmother had made it for her, you know, as a part of her dowry, her wedding gift. And so she has all of her kimonos wrapped. They're carefully wrapped with tissue paper, and there are these special papers to put into that you wrap the kimonos in. And so all of those are wrapped. And then I'm sorry, can't turn that phone off. And it's a medical thing, but yeah, it'll go to voicemail. But anyway, so she has them all wrapped. So once a year, she takes them out and she airs it, because it's a good, you know, you just have to air it so you don't get any worms or anything on. And so, okay, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And there's a certain way of folding everything. And she stores it in this closet, and it's all layered. And they're heavy. So that's the main repository. And then there are artifacts all over the house, different places. So she has one room just for that. And then she has a computer room where she does her writing, and she has her books. And she has bookshelves and boxes of documents.
Akemi, do you remember the initial gift coming to the museum of the artifacts?
You know, I know she made the commitment and the donation, but I don't remember when it came because I wasn't in collection. But as Fay, as you've described your mother's room and how she stored it, when I first met her, she showed me these things. And I'm sure since then, she collected even more, but I was impressed with how she stored it, how she knew how to fold it, and she put it in that, you know, the paper was like acid-free paper, and she treasured it. And I knew it was well taken care of. But I don't know if you're going to ask me another question, but the one thing I remember very, very clearly about your mother, the first person she introduced me to was Haruno Tazawa. And she was at Eva Plantation, a plantation worker, and she had in her wicker basket all the work clothes that she used, everything from the tesashi, the hand, you know, the arm guard, the apron, the bonnet, I mean, you name it, she had it all. And I was so impressed because I had met many families here on the mainland who worked on farms, you know, picking vegetables, fruit. But when I would go to their homes and ask them if I could see some of their work clothes, they'd say, "Are you kidding? We threw that away a long time ago." But your mother treasured it. And I mean, Mrs. Tazawa treasured it. And she kept it to remind herself of the hard labor that she had. And, you know, how proud she was that she, you know, lucky come Hawaii, as the saying goes. But
we're seeing on the screen now, Joy has put up a photo of the museum's film crew when we went to document Mrs. Tazawa at her plantation-era house there. And Barbara is standing right next to her. Mrs. Tazawa is in the center. Mrs. Tazawa, I think, was in her 90s when we filmed her with the crew, with Bob Nakamura and Karen Ishizuka. And
that's you, John.
The young fellow on the far side is me. I started off with the museum as a camera person, so I thought it was one of the amazing things about the museum to work for Bob and Karen, to be able to go to Hawaii and document these incredible people. And you know, the museum has Mrs. Tazawa's clothing and artifacts that are really a treasure of our collection. So I think this was in the early 1990s, actually.
Right.
It was for a project called Bento to Mix Plate.
Mixed plate.
And so I think if you look at the museum website and look up that project, you can see that video of Mrs. Tazawa, and there's an interview with her in Japanese, of course. I think that's to underscore that again. Barbara did all of her interviews in Japanese with the Issei, and I think she remarks in Textured Lives that she was able to understand all the different dialects from different parts of Japan because she grew up on plantation life in Hawaii, which was a very diverse environment. So she used those skills well to gather information for those 250 interviews. Maybe Joy can show some of the shots of Barbara's house inside. So, you know, even though Barbara has given so many objects and articles of clothing to the museum, she still seems to have a ton of material stored at her home. And every time we go visit, she's giving us suitcases of more stuff to bring to the museum. So anyway, this is a shot showing Akira Bach, who was the videographer editor of Textured Lives, as we were documenting Barbara talking about her collection. These items later came to the museum. So and she has an extensive file system of photographs that she collected from all the families that she copied. And you see in this photo, Audrey Muramoto is with us, Audrey Muramoto Kaneko, who I want to shout out to Audrey because she was one of the key people working on the Textured Lives project. And she moved back to Hawaii after working on Textured Lives at JANM. And then our exhibit, we were fortunate enough to travel to the Bishop Museum in Honolulu. And Audrey, here's a shot of Audrey and Barbara during the setup of that exhibition at the Bishop. So I think Audrey may be watching, so I want to thank Audrey all the work she's done helping Barbara organize her collection and her images and helping out with those two versions of the exhibit. And here, it was a pretty big deal at the Bishop.
Yes.
All kinds of events scheduled around the exhibition. We showed the video, there were music performances. So it was great to be able to bring Barbara's exhibition to Honolulu. And I think she really enjoyed greeting all of her friends and people she knew in Hawaii and being able to show them the exhibit. I don't know, Akemi, do you recognize these pieces at all?
That looks like a wedding kimono, the black one.
Yes, actually, this
Didn't
is
we use that in our permanent exhibition on the Issei?
Yes, this is one of Barbara's favorite pieces, I think, is the Shochikubai Wedding Ensemble. I think it was Mrs. Kaigo's collection, but there are three kimonos, one black, one white, and one red, and they were worn as an ensemble, and each has a symbolic design of pine and bamboo. And the reason I remember all this is in planning the exhibition, we had to write all the captions, and we had to refer to Barbara's book, and Barbara, of course, gave us the input, but she really has such a affection for these artifacts and can speak at length on the details of every collected item that we have in our collection. And here she is giving a tour when the exhibition was at JANM. I think that's Mrs. Tazawa's family photo in the back. Is that?
I don't recognize it, but
The little white dress was made from a rice sack. As the plantation workers were very resourceful in using their material to make everyday clothing for their everyday lives. And Barbara was so good at collecting all this information and writing it in her first book, which is kind of a Bible for everyone who's studying Japanese immigration to Hawaii. And in fact, I have back on my shelf, I pulled this book out. This is Barbara's first book,
yes.
Japanese Immigrant Clothing in Hawaii. And you can see this copy has so many markers in it because it was our main source material when we did the exhibition, writing captions for the objects. And I urge everyone to check out this book for a basic primer as to the Japanese immigrant experience to Hawaii and the resourcefulness of those immigrants. I don't know. You were one of the early readers of that book, weren't you?
I was referred to. Well, I got a call from Dennis Ogawa. Some of you from Hawaii would know who he is. He's a professor of ethnic studies, American history, and he said, "Akemi, would you be interested in being a reader for a manuscript that we got from Barbara Kawakami?" I don't remember if he mentioned the name at that time, but Barbara submitted it to the University of Hawaii Press. And he said it's about immigrant clothing, Japanese immigrant clothing. And he went on to describe Barbara and what was in the book. And I said, "Oh my God, that's exactly what what I've been looking for." Because at the time, John, we did not have a collection. It was 1988. We were working out of a warehouse, and we had to borrow things. My job as the curator was to go out and find the stuff, the things, because it wasn't a book on the wall, as it had to be told through artifacts, through things. And so when I read that book, Fay, I booked a flight immediately. I said, "Yes, publish that book." And I went to visit Barbara, and such a giving person. No wonder she lived so long. She was so filled with gratitude to all the people that she interviewed. And she was so generous in sharing those stories with people who were interested, and a shining example for me to emulate throughout my life. So Barbara, if you're listening, I love you. We treasure you. And one other thing I just want to mention is that your collection was seen by the current Emperor of Japan. He came when he was the Crown Prince. He was still, the Emperor was alive. He was not the Emperor at that time. He came, and I was so privileged to give him a tour of the museum. And so he saw your mother's collection. He heard about your work, Barbara. So just thought I would mention that.
So speaking of that, Barbara did receive recently a great honor from the government of Japan. Um, I don't know if you have that picture of her receiving the award. Hey, can you talk a little bit about this award and how meaningful it was to your mother?
So this was in December 2019, and actually the award was given on December 17, 2019, which is the date of my older brother's birthday, Steve. And, he had passed away in 2017. So it was really a special day for my mother. And we went to the Department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And that's where she was presented with the award. And then went to the Imperial Palace. And although I was able to accompany her, I could not go. And we were in the Imperial Palace. She's the only one who was able to go in to the palace itself and see the emperor. So I was not able to see him, but she had a front row seat. She was I think she had a wheelchair because it was such a long walk and it was cold. So she was in a wheelchair. And so she was wheeled into the room with all the other guests who were getting awards. And so that was a really special moment for us. So we're in Tokyo. And then she also wanted to visit her family in Fukushima. So we went there after that, then went to Wakayama and also to Kumamoto. And that was what, she wanted to do on this visit. So we did it all in 11 days, I think it was.
Wow.
But she just enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think people should realize that not everyone is invited. If you receive
Right.
recognition, they usually have annual Kunsho awards for Japanese who have done significant achievement throughout the world. But not everyone is invited to the Imperial
Palace right.
in Japan. And so that was a singular honor for Barbara, I think.
Right.
She was one of those invited back to
right.
meet her.
Because she was normally, if you're like an American citizen, you would get the award at the Japan consulate here. But because she was born in Japan and she was registered in Japan, they asked if she would like to, she had a choice of either getting the award at the Imperial Palace or at the local Japan consulate here. So she decided she wanted to go to Japan. So we had a whole entourage accompanying her. And, the award is called the Order of the Rising Sun, Silver Rays, presented by the government of Japan. So she had the medal. She has a scroll, a certificate, which hangs in her living room. And she was also given these, the Japanese pancakes with the seal, the mon of the emperor. It was quite good. Anyway, we enjoyed that. Yeah. And it was a very nice ceremony. Yeah.
She's gotten a lot of interest in Japan.
Yes.
One of the recent projects is linguistics related. And there was a professor, Asahi, from Japan, who works at a linguistic institute in Japan. And he was looking for Issei, recordings of Issei, who they could analyze their language, because the language in Japan is so much different now than the Issei used when they were immigrating to the US. So I suggested that he meet with Barbara and try to convince her to release her interviews, her 250 interviews, which were all in Issei Japanese. And so Professor Asahi was so overwhelmed with joy to discover such a treasure trove of language from that era. And Barbara had recorded all of them on her cassette faithfully. And so we were able to help this professor copy all the tapes and digitize them. And so they're in Japan being analyzed for linguistic significance, and they're going to make them available with transcripts, and they're doing a whole study with them. So that's yet another wave of use for the material that Barbara has collected. So her influence continues to ripple out through the world, which is great.
Right. We had a nice visit with Dr. Issei last month. He came through and we had a very nice visit. So he updated us on where his work is going and all that. So I think they did complete digitizing everything. And he returned the last of the transcripts that he had to my mother. So yeah, so he's working on it. It's taken long, but thank you very much for the help and for connecting him with us. So we've enjoyed meeting him every time he's been here.
So Fay, what is your mother working on now? Because I understand she's writing.
Yeah,
something.
So the third book is about her own life story. And she had written stories about growing up on the plantation before, and some were published and some were not. So we have put that into a book. And so that's kind of like the first chapter. And then we have stories about her siblings. And we have stories about how we were, as a family, grew up in Waihawa. And then when she started her education at Leeward Community College, that's the part we're working on, her Leeward years, and then her going to the University of Hawaii, and then her research and the work that she did after that, going to lectures and presenting, to various organizations, working with the Kono Foundation and all that, and going to all the neighbor islands. So she has lectured at those different places. We have those speeches, but she's never written about that as a, what that journey was like. So that's the part we're working on. Yeah. So it's, I think we're about halfway through.
Oh,
yeah.
Good.
To plug Barbara's other book.
Oh, yeah.
Picture Bride Stories. And this came out in 2016, I believe. And it's kind of here's Barbara at her book launch at the Cultural Center in Hawaii. She was signing books for everyone. I mentioned this book as a good primer for everyone interested in the collection and the stories behind the clothing in the museum's collection. And I notice in the questions from a comments column, there's a question about if the kimonos in our collection came from wealthier or royal families as opposed to more, say, working class people. And I would say mostly they're from regular, ordinary immigrant people who came to Hawaii. And it's interesting because the wedding kimonos, families would splurge on as much as they could. But when they got to Hawaii, there were practical demands when they had to work in the fields and do various manual labor. So these women adapted their clothing for field use. So, they had to protect their arms and legs from the insects in the fields and the harsh cane leaves that would cut their arms and legs. So they adapted the kimonos in very creative and resourceful ways, which is fascinating to study when you look at the artifacts. They're not just kimonos in the traditional sense. They've really been adapted for immigrant life. And that's what's interesting about Barbara's description of them, and the stories in this book, describe each of those women that she interviewed and their clothing that they brought with them and how they adapted to life, immigrant life. So,
and some of the kimonos were made by families who were sericulturists. So they had their own silkworm farms, and they would weave and design their own kimonos. So they were of a certain quality. And I think the Kaigo one was a wedding dresser, right? Kimono dresser.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So she had some very special kimonos because of her job, what her career was.
So maybe we should, since we brought up the current book that you and your mother are working on, I have a clip talking about Barbara describing what she's writing about in this third book of hers. So maybe, Joy, you could play that clip for us, clip number 2.
I hope that more younger people would devote their time, and participate in all the programs that they have. They need more help, more docents to help with the various functions that are going on. They don't have enough people there. If I were nearby, I would, but I'm too old now to even take care of myself. But I'm glad that while I'm still able to witness what is happening at JANM, it's wonderful to think that from that original, the old Buddhist temple, I saw that when we were there for the inauguration, and to think that, imagine what became from that, the museum pavilion, they call it. Well, you can say modern facility, but I think it's more a museum facility where they have the internment camp life and the World War II, and my brother who fought in 442, and he belonged to the Company I, and that's the company that saved the Texas Battalion. And so my third book that I'm writing about plantation stories, now it's going beyond the plantation stories, because I'm going into World War II, where my brother fought in Italy, and here he was one of the 8 that returned alive from the Company I. The hundreds of them to save the Texas Battalion had died while trying to save the Texas soldiers, And so that was kind of sad. They lost more of the men. And so my plantation story will be more lively and more, colorful, because I'm adding things from my brother and my youngest brother who fought in the Korean War too. And so all that will be included. So I hope I can do it as soon as I can.
Wow.
So
it's going to be a bestseller.
Looking forward to that book.
Yes, it's a work in progress.
Well, our time is down to the last 10 minutes. So if anyone has questions from viewers, we'd be happy to address them. I also wanted to acknowledge all the people that have touched the Textured Lives project, that really worked with Barbara and for Barbara, really, because of their great respect and love for her. At JANM, there were several curators working on the exhibition. I wanted to mention Lisa Itagaki, who traveled to Hawaii to do that video interview that you see in Textured Lives, and Christine Kim, who was one of the curators who made multiple visits to Barbara. She's from Hawaii herself. She worked on the project. I think what happened with Christine was she got pregnant right during the phase when we were doing the Textured Lives exhibit planning, and so she was not able to participate as as fully as she would have wanted to, but I want to acknowledge her work on that. And Akira Bach, of course, the very talented videographer who put together the Textured Lives video, and I urge you to watch it if you haven't. It has some wonderful music by Hawaii's own Ozzy Kotani and his musical partner Steve Sano. They created a wonderful soundtrack of Hawaiian music, and they're just, the list goes on and on. There's Chris Connie Bear, who worked with Barbara on a documentary about the early Issei, and he was very cooperative and letting us use some material for the video. So it was a great collaboration. I see another question asking if Barbara was in an internment camp during World War II.
No, she was not. Yeah.
In Hawaii, they were, I think the government realized they could not incarcerate every Japanese American in Hawaii because they were going to paralyze the economy of Hawaii at the time. You know, they only took selected suspicious individuals that they interned. They in camps in Hawaii, but Barbara did not have to endure that during the war.
No, she was not a citizen. However, she was considered an alien, so she, you know, she didn't have her citizenship papers, so she had a curfew of 6 p.m., I believe. So she couldn't go out at night. She couldn't go on dates. So maybe that's why my father went to her house and read to her because they couldn't really go out. Yeah, so she, in fact, she had worked as a volunteer at a hospital with other girls who were trained in first aid, and she was very happy to do that. But when they found out that she was not a U.S. citizen, that she was an alien, she got a letter, I think, from a general saying that they could not use her. So she couldn't go back to volunteer. Yeah. So, but she did get her U.S. citizenship when, I know when I was in elementary school, I think she got her citizenship.
So I wanted to ask, because you know, Barbara went back to school after you and Gary were graduated college, right? Or it was near the time you were already adults. And were you aware of the significance of her vision for the future and
her ambition? Yeah.
the work she wanted to do? Or
I think when she was, I know when I was in, I think, intermediate school, she was studying for her GED and citizenship. So I know she took her citizenship and her GED classes and had to take the test. And we would, you know, I would tutor her in math and her writing or whatever. And when my brother was going off to, I think it was his last year or his junior year to college on the mainland, he was in an exchange program. That's when he encouraged my mother to, you know, pursue what she wanted to do, because she had, you know, saved money, worked as a dressmaker so we could go to college. And so we all worked part-time, went to college, and we were like, Gary was the last one. And so after he left for college, that's when she decided, well, she wanted to go to college too. And so we encouraged her. We were very supportive. We helped her whatever we could. She learned to drive a car at that age. And I was one of her driving instructors. It's a very interesting experience. But anyway, yeah, so we did that. And, you know, whatever she needed help with, we helped her. And, you know, editing her papers or whatever. needed to be done. So even today, Gary and I are helping her with her book. When Steve was still living, whenever she's doing a speech, we'd all be involved. She's sending it to all of us by email, and we have to give feedback. And we were like her editorial board, family editorial. But yeah, we were always involved. And, she had supported us, and it was our way of course, we want to support you, Mom. Yeah, we did that.
Fay, she was very proud of her children. She always mentioned her children. She's so proud. I know she's a good mother. And she had great children.
Thank you.
Well, as we approach the end of our session, we have a few minutes left. Have we left anything out, Akemi or Fay, about Barbara's work or the significance of textured lives to the museum?
One thing I wanted to mention was because of her collection being at JANM, that has made her work worldwide. It's gone to Japan, but it's also gone to Europe. So every so often we'll get an email, could we share this, or someone wants to use this. And I mean, that's phenomenal. We've, for JANM to be that repository of her collection and be able to share it, that has been, a great impact for my mother, but for our family, but also for the world to know what it was like for immigrants, how they had to adapt or what they brought with them, and to have that shared with the world is just phenomenal. I always appreciate what JANM has done for that. My mother does too, but that's something that we never envisioned. Growing up in Hawaii, being on this island, we never envisioned that she would have that worldwide impact. But thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
Fay, and thank Barbara. Barbara, I hope you're watching. Thank you. We'll be forever grateful to you. Thank you.
So as we close this, Barbara, if you're watching, we really appreciate all of what you've done and wish you the best on your upcoming birthday. Thank you so much for inspiring many generations of museum goers, and certainly museum staff who have worked with you are continually inspired when they work with your collection or read your work. So anyway, I hope your upcoming birthday is full of joy and celebration. I know your family will have a special celebration for you. But anyway, thank you, Fay, for joining us. Thank you, Akemi. It's been a great discussion that has, the hours flown by quickly. So
thank you, John. Thank you, John and Joy, for pulling it together. And thank you, Barbara. I know you're watching. I'm waiting for your next book.
So if I could just note at the end here that if you just caught a part of this program or you wanted to watch it again, it will be recorded and available on our JANM YouTube channel. So tell your friends if they missed it. And I guess we'll turn it back to Joy to close up.
Thank you so much to you to you three, and the fourth, of course, being Barbara, who you know is watching. We are so grateful to be able to join in this discussion. And yes, as John mentioned, this link will be available for both this video as well as the short film. And you can explore the collection online. Those links are in the chat and the video description. And we hope that you continue to share, as you mentioned, Barbara's story and collection worldwide, and continue to keep joining us for more JANM programs. And we look forward to Barbara's next book. And happy birthday, everyone. To say happy birthday to Barbara in the chat. And with that, we'll close out. Thank you so much, Akemi, John, and Fay, for this wonderful conversation. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.